Macmillan Audio presents The Rightful Queen, Book 2 of The Paths of Lantistyne by Isabelle Steiger. Read for you by Jeremy Arthur. Chapter 1. Lantistyne. There were times when Tallis would see his face in her mind's eye. His face as it had been, before she had changed it. It was strange, and more than a little annoying. She was not one to take any note of faces, least of all those of people she'd killed. Still, his persisted. She had never learned his name, but his face was clear in her memory. The perfectly proportioned nose, the high cheekbones, the elegant jaw, and those eyes, blue and blue and blue, no matter how much light or shadow fell on them. It was a face with all the outward markers of beauty, but it had never fooled her, not even from the first. She had seen past it, to the emptiness behind his eyes, the way his gaze fell on her without interest or empathy. To him she was no different from the grass they stood on or the sky overhead, an inanimate background to whatever world he lived in. But not at the end. He had seen her. Truly seen her at the end. Perhaps that was what kept bothering her about him. It was unfair, she had thought even then. He was a man who had intended her only ill, who would have subdued her if he could have. It was unfair of him to look so lost at the end, like an innocent child. Things were less than ideal in many ways. The wind was picking up, worrying at the edges of her consciousness with its vague whistle. It prickled at the back of her neck, made the skin of her arms clammy and cold. She had too much of Voltest's influence with her today, making her irritable and on edge, too quick to startle, too quick to take offense. She could feel it lurking there, that anger, biding its time like a hunter in the brush. All it needed was a target. Damn that man and his stupid face. She still couldn't tell whether the persistence of that memory was the cause of this skittish anxiety or a result of it, but still it lingered, floating behind her eyelids as she picked her way forward in the deepening dusk. If I trip because of him, she thought, I'd kill him twice. The path wound around the side of what could only be charitably called a mountain. The terrain was rocky and treacherous, but the summit was fairly low, only 20 or 30 feet above her. She'd walked it countless times before. It led south, through Cutter's Vale, which was usually the most deserted crossing between Lantistyne, she wouldn't call it Hallernan, whatever the map said, and Esthrades. Though the overcast sky and the fading light made for poor visibility, she could just make out the vale far below to her left, a brief reprieve of flat land before you had to walk up into the hills again. There seemed to be more people passing through than usual, though Tallis couldn't think why. She had been born and raised in Lantistyne, and though she would never have called herself King Air's most loyal subject, she had an attachment to this country, stubborn and possessive more than affectionate. But there it was. It burned her to know her country had fallen under Elgar's sway, that despite their power, she and Voltest had not been able to stall his plans to their satisfaction. Worse, the hesitation that had plagued Elgar after the Lantistyne War seemed finally to have left him. Voltest was certain he would move imminently to conquer Regle, and Voltest's information was never wrong. That left only Esthrades and Issamira free and clear of him, so to Esthrades Tallis went. Perhaps there, in a country ruled by a rumored sorceress, she would find something more promising. She was able to overtake most of the travelers in her way, silent stragglers fighting their way onward in ones and twos. But when she tried to pass a particularly weary-looking one, a slender boy struggling with a heavy satchel, she realized he was actually the slowest member of a group of 3. The other 2 fanned outward, making it difficult for her to get past them, and she swallowed her irritation. She knew she wasn't really angry at them. Their leader, a blond fellow who looked about 18 or 19, called back to the boy with the satchel, a year or 2 younger than he was, with a long braid of hair so pale it was almost white. "You all right, Huel? We're almost to the border." The boy was breathing hard, but he drew himself up bravely. "I'm all right, like you said. Not long now."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?